I sat in the lawyer's mahogany-paneled office watching my daughter-in-law Stephanie smirk while texting on her phone. The will reading was about to begin. Stephanie had already told everyone at last week's funeral that I would get nothing from my husband Frank's $53 million estate. Now, Stephanie adjusted her designer sunglasses and whispered to her attorney. The family lawyer, Mr. Henderson, cleared his throat and opened the sealed envelope. What happened next would change everything I thought I knew about my 45-year marriage. My name is Lucille Morrison, and until 2 weeks ago, I believed I had lived a charmed life. At 67, I could look back on 4.5 decades with Frank and see nothing but love, partnership, and shared dreams made real. We started with nothing but his beat-up Ford truck and my grandmother's wedding ring. Frank had big dreams of building a construction empire, and I had faith in him when nobody else did. Those early years tested us in ways young couples today might not understand. I worked 3 jobs while Frank bid on contracts he couldn't afford to lose. We lived on peanut butter sandwiches and hope. When our son Marcus was born, I gave birth in the charity ward because we couldn't afford anything else. Frank held my hand and promised me that someday I'd have everything I deserved. He kept that promise, or so I thought. Morrison Construction grew from 1 truck to a fleet of hundreds. We moved from our cramped apartment to a suburban colonial, then finally to the estate in Westchester County. The house had 12 bedrooms, though it was just the 3 of us rattling around in all that space. Frank insisted on the grandeur. "You supported me when I was nothing," he'd say, leading me through another marble hallway. "This is what you deserve." The empire building came at a cost. Frank developed high blood pressure in his 40s, had his first heart attack at 52. I nursed him back to health, managed his medications, changed our entire lifestyle. We cut out red meat, started morning walks, did yoga together, even though Frank grumbled about it constantly. The business stress never let up, but we found ways to cope together. Then came the bankruptcy scare in 1987. The market crashed, construction dried up overnight, and suddenly we owed more than we owned. I'll never forget Frank sitting at our kitchen table, his head in his hands, telling me we might lose everything. I pulled out my grandmother's ring, the one piece of jewelry I'd kept through everything, and placed it on the table. "We started with this," I told him. "If we have to start over, we'll do it again." We didn't have to sell the ring. Frank found investors, restructured the company, and came back stronger. By the time Marcus graduated from college, Morrison Construction was worth millions. We celebrated by taking a cruise to Alaska, just the 2 of us renewing our vows on the deck as glaciers calved in the distance. Marcus met Stephanie 3 years ago at a charity function I'd organized. She was working for the catering company, or so she said. Later, I learned she'd actually crashed the party specifically to meet wealthy men. But that first night, she seemed lovely. 28 years old, blonde, articulate, with a story about putting herself through community college while caring for sick parents. Frank was charmed. Marcus was smitten. They married within 6 months. I had reservations about the rush, but Frank overruled me. "Let the kids be happy," he said. "Life's too short to wait." Looking back, I wonder if he already knew his time was limited. The wedding cost $200,000, all white orchids and crystal chandeliers. Stephanie insisted on the best of everything. After the wedding, things changed subtly at first. Stephanie began showing up at Frank's office, offering to help with administrative tasks. She had a background in bookkeeping, she said, and wanted to contribute to the family business. Frank, always eager to bring family into the fold, welcomed her assistance. Our weekly family dinners became sporadic. Marcus always had excuses. Stephanie had a headache. They had plans with her friends. Work was demanding. When they did come, Stephanie would steer conversations toward the business, asking pointed questions about assets, investments, offshore holdings. "You two should really modernize your financial planning," she'd say, cutting her salmon into precise squares. "There are so many tax advantages you're missing out on." The late-night phone calls started about 3 years ago. Frank would slip out of bed murmuring about international clients and time zones. I believed him. Why wouldn't I? In 45 years, he'd never given me reason to doubt. But 2 weeks before his death, I needed a document from his home office for our accountant. Frank kept the filing cabinet locked, but I knew where he hid the key. Inside, I found property deeds I didn't recognize, bank statements for accounts I'd never seen, transfer authorizations with my signature, except I'd never signed them. My hands shook as I photographed everything with my phone. There was a deed for a downtown penthouse purchased 2 years prior, bank accounts in the Cayman Islands, investment portfolios I knew nothing about, all dated within the last 3 years, all coinciding with Stephanie's arrival in our lives. The receipts were what really caught my attention. Charges for jewelry I'd never received, restaurant bills for places Frank claimed to hate, hotel stays in the city when he was supposedly at conferences in Boston. My stomach turned as the implications became clear. That night, Frank came to bed late, sliding under the covers carefully so as not to wake me. I lay still, feigning sleep, my mind racing. Who was this man I'd shared my life with? What else didn't I know? The next morning, Frank had his heart attack. He clutched his chest during breakfast, his coffee cup shattering on the floor. The ambulance came quickly, but I knew. 45 years of watching his every breath, and I knew this was different. He died on the way to the hospital, his hand in mine, trying to say something I couldn't understand. In my grief, I pushed aside what I'd discovered. There would be time to sort through the mystery after the funeral. I had a husband to bury, a son to comfort, arrangements to make. The questions could wait. But Stephanie couldn't. Even before Frank's body was cold, she was making plans. "Don't worry about anything, Mom," she said, though I'd asked her repeatedly not to call me that. "I'll handle all the financial details. You just focus on grieving." The way she said it, so smooth and practiced, made my skin crawl. But I was too numb to respond, too overwhelmed by the loss of my life partner to fully grasp what was happening around me. I should have known then, should have seen the vultures circling. But grief has a way of blinding us to the obvious threats. A week after the funeral, I overheard Stephanie on the phone in Frank's office. She thought I was napping, heavily medicated like she'd suggested to the doctor, but I'd only pretended to take the sedatives. "Everything's in place," she said. "The old woman has no idea. Marcus is completely under control. Yes, the will reading is next week. After that, we're home free." My blood ran cold. The pieces started clicking into place. The mysterious accounts, the property transfers, the way Stephanie had ingratiated herself into Frank's business affairs. Had my husband betrayed me, or was something more sinister at play? I knew then that I needed to be very careful. If Stephanie was planning something, if she'd somehow manipulated Frank in his final years, I couldn't let on that I suspected anything. I had to play the part of the grieving, clueless widow. That night I went through Frank's personal effects one more time. Hidden in his sock drawer beneath 45 years of anniversary cards he'd saved, I found a business card. Martha Hendricks, private investigator. On the back, in Frank's shaky handwriting, "If something happens to me, give this to Lucille." My heart stopped. Frank had known. Whatever was happening, Frank had seen it coming. But why hadn't he told me? Why hadn't he protected us? I tucked the card into my purse and prepared for the performance of my lifetime. If Stephanie thought she was dealing with a feeble old woman, she was about to learn just how wrong she was. I'd survived poverty near bankruptcy and 45 years in the brutal construction business. I'd buried my husband, but I'd be damned if I'd let his legacy be stolen by a con artist who thought a pretty smile and a sob story were enough to fool a Morrison. The will reading was in 5 days. I had work to do. The morning of Frank's funeral dawned gray and drizzling, fitting weather for saying goodbye to the man who'd been my world. I stood before my closet choosing between 2 black dresses when Stephanie knocked and entered without waiting for permission. "Oh, Lucille," she sighed, clutching a tissue she never quite brought to her eyes. "This must be so hard for you. Here, let me help." She reached past me and pulled out the older, more modest dress. "This one. Frank always said he preferred you in simple things." Frank had never said any such thing. He loved seeing me dressed up, said, "I deserved to sparkle after all our lean years." But I took the dress without comment, watching Stephanie's reflection in the mirror. She was already dressed in a designer suit that probably cost more than we'd lived on for a year in the early days. Her makeup was flawless, her hair professionally styled. She looked like a wealthy widow, not a grieving daughter-in-law. At the funeral home, Stephanie took charge immediately. She guided me to a chair in the corner, patting my hand condescendingly. "You just sit here and rest. I'll greet everyone. You're too fragile for all this stress." I let her position me like a doll, observing everything while appearing to see nothing. The funeral director approached with questions about the service, and Stephanie intercepted him. "Mrs. Morrison isn't up to making decisions," she said smoothly. "I'm handling all the arrangements. We've already discussed everything." We'd discussed nothing. I'd planned Frank's funeral years ago, down to the songs and readings. We'd talked about it after his first heart attack, making sure we each knew what the other wanted. But Stephanie had changed everything. The simple service Frank wanted had become an ostentatious display. The funeral home was filled with arrangements of exotic flowers instead of the roses from our garden Frank had specifically requested. Marcus arrived late, reeking of alcohol despite it being 10 in the morning. His suit was wrinkled, his face haggard. When he saw me, his eyes filled with genuine tears. "Mom," he whispered, falling to his knees beside my chair. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." Stephanie materialized instantly, pulling him up with surprising strength. "Not now, darling. You're making a scene. Go compose yourself in the bathroom." She steered him away before I could speak, before I could ask what he was sorry for. When he returned, he wouldn't meet my eyes, staying close to Stephanie's side like a chastened child. The service itself was a blur of faces and condolences. Frank's business associates, neighbors, friends from the country club. They all spoke to Stephanie, who stood at the casket like a professional mourner, dabbing at dry eyes and accepting sympathy with practiced grace. "Such a devoted daughter-in-law," I heard someone whisper. "Look how she's taking care of everything. Poor Lucille looks completely lost." I wanted to scream that I wasn't lost, just watching, but I stayed in my corner playing the role Stephanie had cast me in. Let her think I was beaten. Let them all think it. Halfway through the viewing, I noticed the man in the expensive suit. He stood at the back, not signing the guest book, not approaching the casket. He was younger than most of Frank's associates, maybe 40, with the kind of careful attention that suggested he was memorizing every detail. When our eyes met, he gave the slightest nod before turning his attention to Stephanie. During the eulogy, which Stephanie delivered despite Marcus being Frank's son, I heard her phone buzz. She ignored it the first time, carrying on about Frank's generosity and vision. The second buzz made her falter. The third had her glancing down, and I saw it clearly. A smile. Quick, involuntary, the kind you can't help when you get good news. She covered it by pretending to be overcome with emotion, but I'd seen enough. The reception was held at our home. Stephanie had insisted, saying it's what Frank would have wanted. Another lie. Frank hated having business associates in our personal space. He'd always said the house was our sanctuary, separate from Morrison Construction's demands. I made my way upstairs claiming I needed a moment alone. Instead, I headed for our bedroom, where I'd noticed Stephanie disappearing earlier. The door was closed, but I could hear her inside drawers opening and closing. Through the keyhole, I watched her trying on my jewelry, my mother's pearl necklace, the diamond earrings Frank gave me for our 25th anniversary, the emerald ring that had been his mother's. She held each piece up to the light, appraising them like a jeweler. "Perfect," she murmured, slipping the emerald onto her finger. "Absolutely perfect." My stomach churned, but I forced myself to move away silently. Let her play dress up. Let her count chickens that would never hatch. I had bigger concerns than jewelry. Back downstairs, I noticed the mysterious man from the funeral was gone, but he'd left something behind on the hall table, a business card placed precisely where I'd find it. Robert Carlyle, Financial Investigations. On the back, a phone number and a single word, soon. I pocketed the card and returned to my role as the grieving widow. Stephanie found me in the living room surrounded by sympathetic neighbors. "There you are," she cooed. "I was worried. You shouldn't wander off alone. You might fall or forget where you are." "I'm 67, not 97, I wanted to snap. Instead, I smiled vaguely and let her guide me to a chair. The guests thinned out as evening approached. Stephanie held court in the dining room, Marcus silent beside her. I heard fragments of conversation that made my blood boil. "Of course we'll take care of everything. The construction business needs steady leadership. Lucille isn't equipped to handle complex finances. We're just grateful Frank had the foresight to make proper arrangements." Proper arrangements. The phrase stuck in my mind like a splinter. What exactly had Frank arranged? And more importantly, what had Stephanie arranged in Frank's name? Near the powder room, I heard Stephanie on the phone again. She'd stepped into Frank's study, not realizing the acoustics carried her voice clearly through the heating vent. "Derek, stop panicking. Everything's under control. 3 more days until the reading. Yes, I told you the old fool signed everything over. Even better, we got him to specifically exclude her for tax purposes. No, she has no idea. She's so medicated she barely knows her own name." I gripped the wall to steady myself. Derek. Who was Derek? And what exactly had Frank signed? The Frank I knew would never exclude me from anything. We'd built Morrison Construction together. Every major decision had been ours, not his. Stephanie's voice dropped lower. The power of attorney was genius. No, Marcus doesn't remember signing it. I told you those pills would work. Stop worrying about the old woman. After the reading, she'll be in a nursing home so fast. I've already got the place picked out. Very secure, very discreet. They specialize in difficult patients who make wild accusations. A nursing home. They were planning to lock me away. The fury that rose in my chest was unlike anything I'd felt before. Not hot rage, but something colder, more calculated. They'd killed my husband. I was sure of it now, and they were planning to dispose of me like garbage. "I have to go," Stephanie said. "People are starting to leave. Yes, I'll see you tonight. No, not at the penthouse, too risky. Our usual place. Love you too." Love you too. Not to Marcus, but to this Derek. My daughter-in-law was having an affair on top of everything else. Poor Marcus. My poor weak son who'd inherited his father's trusting nature but none of his strength. I made it back to my chair before Stephanie emerged, her phone tucked away, her mask of grief firmly in place. "Lucille, you look exhausted," she said loudly enough for the remaining guests to hear. "I think we should get you to bed. The doctor said you need rest." The doctor had said no such thing, but I let her help me up, let her guide me upstairs like an invalid. At my bedroom door, she produced a pill bottle. Your sedatives, she said, shaking 2 into her palm. Take these. You'll sleep better. I palmed the pills and pretended to swallow them. Stephanie watched carefully, even asking me to open my mouth like a child. I'd tucked them under my tongue, a trick I'd learned when Frank had been overzealous with pain medication after his heart attack. Good, she said, patting my cheek. Sleep well, Mom. Don't worry about anything downstairs. I'll handle all the cleanup. The moment she left, I spat out the pills and examined them. They weren't my prescription. The markings were different, the color slightly off. I wrapped them in tissue and tucked them into my purse with the business cards. Evidence. I was starting to understand I'd need all the evidence I could get. Through my bedroom window, I watched the last guests leave. Stephanie stood in the driveway, waving and smiling, every inch the devoted family member. Marcus stumbled behind her, barely able to stand. Whatever she was giving him was stronger than what she'd tried to give me. As their car pulled away, I noticed another vehicle parked across the street, a dark sedan with tinted windows. It had been there all day, I realized. As I watched, the mysterious man from the funeral emerged and walked to another car. Before driving away, he looked up at my window and nodded again. I wasn't alone in this. Someone else knew something was wrong. Someone else was watching Stephanie. The question was whether they were friend or foe, and whether I could trust anyone at all. That night, I lay in bed planning my next move. The will reading was in 3 days. Whatever Stephanie thought was in that will, she was confident enough to be making plans for my institutionalization. But Frank's note, the private investigator's card, the mysterious watcher, they all suggested a different story. Tomorrow I'd make some calls, starting with Martha Frank's old secretary who'd retired so abruptly. Something told me her departure hadn't been as voluntary as it seemed, and maybe, just maybe, she'd have the answers I needed. Stephanie thought she was dealing with a drugged, grieving widow. She was about to learn that Lucille Morrison didn't survive 45 years in the construction business by being anybody's fool. The performance had begun, and I intended to play my part to perfection until the final curtain revealed the truth. The morning after Frank's funeral, I woke with the kind of clarity that comes from purposeful anger. No more tears, no more confusion. I had work to do. Stephanie thought I was sedated and grieving, which gave me the perfect cover to investigate. Martha Hendricks had been Frank's secretary for 23 years before her abrupt retirement 6 months ago. She'd left without a party, without the gold watch Frank had bought for her, without even cleaning out her desk properly. That wasn't like Martha. She was methodical, organized, and fiercely loyal to Frank. I found her number in my address book, the one Stephanie didn't know existed, because it lived in my kitchen drawer beneath old recipes. My hands were steady as I dialed. "Martha, it's Lucille Morrison." The silence stretched so long I thought she'd hung up. Then barely a whisper. "Mrs. Morrison, I heard about Mr. Frank. I'm so sorry." "Martha, I need to see you. It's important." "I can't. I'm sorry, but I just can't." The fear in her voice confirmed my suspicions. "Martha, please. I know something's wrong. I know why you left. Frank's gone now. They can't hurt you anymore." Another pause. Then, "Hillside Diner on Route 9. 2 o'clock. Come alone. Park in the back." The Hillside Diner was 30 miles outside town, the kind of place truckers stopped for coffee and nobody asked questions. I arrived early, choosing a booth with clear views of both entrances. Martha arrived exactly on time, looking older than her 68 years. Her hands shook as she slid into the seat across from me. "You look terrible," I said gently. "I haven't slept well in 6 months," Martha admitted. "Mrs. Morrison, I'm so sorry. I wanted to warn you, but she said she'd hurt my grandchildren." "Stephanie." Martha nodded, tears pooling in her eyes. "It started small. She'd come to the office sweet as pie, offering to help with filing. Mr. Frank was pleased. He thought it showed family spirit. When did you realize something was wrong? About 4 months before I left. I came in early one morning and found her in Mr. Frank's office. She had his signature stamp out, the one we used for routine documents. When she saw me, she smiled and said she was helping with some invoices. But those weren't invoices, Mrs. Morrison. They were transfer documents. My coffee grew cold as Martha continued. I started paying attention after that. She was always around when Mr. Frank was signing things. She'd chat and laugh, keep his coffee filled with that special creamer she brought. He'd get drowsy after lunch, sign whatever she put in front of him. The creamer. I had my grandson test it. He's a chemistry major. There was something in it, a mild sedative. Not enough to really hurt him, just enough to make him compliant. The pieces were clicking into place, each one more damaging than the last. What about Derek? Martha's face went white. You know about Derek. Just the name. Who is he? Derek Ashford. He's Mr. Frank's junior partner, brought in 3 years ago to handle international accounts. Young, ambitious, charming. He and Stephanie. I saw them together one night when I came back for my purse. In the conference room, they weren't discussing business. Marcus doesn't know. Martha shook her head. Your son is a good man, but he's weak. Stephanie got him hooked on pain pills after a minor car accident. She controls his supply. I've seen him beg her for them. My poor son. My poor lost boy. I pushed down the maternal fury and focused on facts. Martha, I need proof. Documents, recordings, anything. She glanced around nervously before sliding a flash drive across the table. I knew this day would come. I copied everything I could before they forced me out. Security footage of Stephanie practicing Mr. Frank's signature. Emails between her and Derek discussing offshore accounts. Bank statements showing transfers. It's all there. Why didn't you go to the police? With what a powerful businessman's wife making accusations against his daughter-in-law, they'd made it look like Mr. Frank was doing everything willingly. And then she pulled out her phone, showing me a photo. This was left on my granddaughter's bicycle seat. It was a picture of the little girl at school taken with a telephoto lens. The message was clear. Martha, did Frank know what was happening? Near the end, yes. He started asking questions about missing funds. He had me hire a private investigator without telling anyone. Robert Carlyle. Mr. Frank was building a case, but then his heart attack. His medication was changed, Mrs. Morrison. I saw Stephanie in his office the week before handling his pill organizer. I can't prove it, but I know she did something. I thought of the pills Stephanie had tried to give me last night. The wrong color, the wrong markings. She killed him. Martha reached across the table, gripping my hand. Be careful. They've been planning this for years. Everything leads to the will reading. Whatever Mr. Frank signed, they think it gives them everything. But you said Frank knew. He was investigating. He was. But I don't know how far he got. After they forced me out, I lost access to everything. She pulled out a business card identical to the one I'd found. Contact Carlyle. If anyone knows what Mr. Frank discovered, it's him. I pocketed the flash drive and the card. Martha, after the will reading, after I handle this, I want you to come back. Morrison Construction needs you. If you're still running Morrison Construction after the reading, she said quietly. Mrs. Morrison, they've been very thorough. Whatever's in that, Stephanie is absolutely certain it gives her everything. We'll see about that, I said with more confidence than I felt. I left cash on the table and walked Martha to her car. Before she drove away, she rolled down her window. There's one more thing. The night before Mr. Frank's heart attack, he stayed late at the office. He called me, asked me to witness something. I thought it was strange because it was past 10, but I went. He had me and the night security guard witness a document. He wouldn't tell me what it was, just said it was insurance. He put it in his personal safe, the one built into the floor of his office. As far as I know, Stephanie doesn't know about that safe. My heart raced. Do you know the combination? Your anniversary date. He never changed it in 23 years. I watched Martha drive away, then sat in my car processing everything I'd learned. Frank had known. He'd been investigating, preparing, but had he finished in time? Was whatever he'd hidden in that safe enough to stop Stephanie and Derek? Back home, I called Robert Carlyle from my bathroom with the water running, paranoid about listening devices. Mrs. Morrison, he answered on the first ring. I've been expecting your call. You were at the funeral. I was. Your husband hired me 4 months ago. We were building a case against his daughter-in-law and Derek Ashford for embezzlement fraud and attempted murder. Attempted murder, but Frank is dead. The attempted murder charge was for you, Mrs. Morrison. We have evidence that they were slowly poisoning you. Small doses of heavy metals in your food. Not enough to kill quickly, but enough to cause confusion, memory loss symptoms that would support having you declared incompetent. I sank onto the closed toilet lid. All those dizzy spells over the past year. The days when I couldn't remember simple things. The times Stephanie expressed concern about my declining mental state in front of witnesses. Why didn't Frank tell me? He was trying to protect you. He thought if you knew, you might confront them before we had enough evidence. He wanted an airtight case. Carlyle paused. Mrs. Morrison, he loved you very much. Everything he did was to protect you. But he died before he could stop them. Maybe, maybe not. Your husband was a smart man. He knew they were escalating, knew his own health was compromised. I think he put safeguards in place. The will reading is tomorrow. I know. Whatever happens in that room, don't react. Don't show surprise, anger, anything. Let them think they've won. Can you do that? I've been pretending to be a feeble old woman for days. I can manage one more performance. Good. Because I'll be there, Mrs. Morrison, with some very interesting guests. Your husband made sure of that. After we hung up, I spent the rest of the day playing my part. When Stephanie stopped by to check on me, I was appropriately confused and drowsy. I let her guide me to the couch, accepted the tea she brought, and poured it into the potted plant when she wasn't looking. The will reading is tomorrow, she said, watching me closely. Are you sure you're up for it? We could always have you sign a proxy. Let me handle everything. Frank would want me there, I said, making my voice quaver. She patted my hand condescendingly. Of course. Just remember, whatever happens, Marcus and I will take care of you. You won't have to worry about anything ever again. The threat was barely veiled, but I smiled vacantly and thanked her. Inside, I was steel. Tomorrow the trap would spring. Whether it was Stephanie's trap or Frank's remained to be seen. That night I couldn't resist. I drove to Morrison Construction's offices, using my spare key to enter through the loading dock. Frank's office was untouched, his presence still filling the space. I knelt by his desk and lifted the hidden panel. The safe was there, just as Martha had said. My fingers trembled as I entered our anniversary date. The lock clicked open. Inside were stacks of documents, USB drives, and a sealed envelope with my name on it. I took everything, my heart pounding as I heard footsteps in the hallway. I barely made it behind the door before Derek Ashford entered. He went straight to Frank's computer, typing rapidly. In the light from the monitor, his face was hard, calculating. Nothing like the charming young partner who'd attended our dinner parties. He made a phone call, his voice carrying clearly in the quiet office. It's done. The last transfers went through tonight. After tomorrow, Morrison Construction will be ours. Well, yours technically, until we implement Phase 2. Phase 2. I pressed myself against the wall, hardly daring to breathe. Stop worrying about the old lady. Stephanie has her completely controlled. After tomorrow's reading, she'll be in Shady Pines before the week is out. They have a very secure ward for patients with delusions. She'll be screaming the truth and no one will believe her." He laughed, the sound making my skin crawl. "Marcus. He's so doped up he'd sign his own death warrant. Once his mother's committed and he's had his unfortunate overdose, you'll be a very wealthy widow. Then we can stop pretending and finally be together." My hand covered my mouth to stifle a gasp. They were planning to kill Marcus, too. My son might be weak, but he was still my child. The fury that filled me was primal protective and absolutely clarifying. Derek left after destroying several files. I waited a full hour before creeping out Frank's documents clutched to my chest. At home, I locked myself in the bathroom and read Frank's letter by flashlight. "My dearest Lucille, if you're reading this, then my worst fears have come true. I'm sorry I didn't tell you everything, but I needed you to be genuinely innocent of what I was planning. Stephanie and Derek are vipers, but they're about to learn that even dead men can bite. Trust Henderson, trust Carlyle, trust no one else. The will they think exists isn't the only will. I've spent 45 years loving you, and I'll be damned if I'll let them steal even one penny of what we built together. All my love, Frank. P.S. Remember our honeymoon. Remember what I promised you at sunrise on the beach. I kept that promise then, and I'm keeping it now." I remembered. We'd been young and poor, honeymooning in a borrowed beach cottage. Frank had promised that he'd always protect me, always put me first, even if it meant protecting me from beyond the grave. The documents in the safe painted a complete picture. Frank had evidence of everything: the forgeries, the embezzlement, the poisoning. He'd even discovered that Derek Ashford wasn't who he claimed to be. His real name was Derek Paulson, and he'd done this before. 3 elderly victims, 3 wealthy widows left penniless or institutionalized. But the crown jewel was a notarized document dated just 1 week before Frank's death. I couldn't make sense of all the legal language, but one thing was clear: Frank had been busy in his final days. The will reading was tomorrow. Stephanie and Derek thought they'd won. Marcus needed saving. And I had a husband to avenge. I climbed into bed with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in months. Tomorrow the masks would come off. Tomorrow Frank's final plan would unfold. Tomorrow Stephanie would learn what happened when you tried to con a Morrison. Let her come with her forged documents and fake tears. Let her smile and scheme and count her stolen millions. Because tomorrow in that mahogany-paneled room, she'd discover that the last laugh, the one that really counted, wouldn't be hers. It would be Frank's and mine. I woke at 5 a.m. on the day of the will reading with absolute clarity of purpose. The grieving widow was gone. In her place stood Lucille Morrison, a woman who'd clawed her way from poverty to prosperity and wasn't about to let 2 grifters steal it all. My first call was to Dr. Patricia Chen, my physician for 15 years. She agreed to see me immediately when I mentioned poisoning. The blood tests confirmed elevated levels of thallium and arsenic, classic choices for slow, untraceable murder. Patricia documented everything, made copies of the results, and promised to testify if needed. "How long?" I asked her. "Based on these levels, I'd say you've been ingesting small amounts for at least 8 months. You're lucky, Lucille. Another few months and the damage would have been irreversible." Lucky. I thought of Frank, who hadn't been as fortunate. The rage that filled me was cold, purposeful. I tucked the medical reports into my growing file of evidence. My next stop was unexpected. I drove to Marcus's apartment using my spare key to enter. My son was passed out on the couch, pill bottles scattered on the coffee table. I photographed everything, then gently shook him awake. "Mom." He blinked up at me, confused and ashamed. "What are you doing here?" "Getting my son back," I said firmly. I gathered the pills, checking labels. Half were legitimate prescriptions, but the others were unmarked, clearly black market. How long has Stephanie been supplying these? Marcus broke down the words pouring out between sobs. The car accident 18 months ago had been Stephanie's idea, a way to get him legitimately prescribed pain medication. Once he was hooked, she'd become his sole supplier, controlling him completely. She made me sign things, Mom. I don't even know what. She said if I didn't, she'd cut me off and the withdrawal. He shuddered. I'm so sorry. Dad would be so ashamed. Your father loved you, I said, holding him as I hadn't since he was small. And he knew you were in trouble. We're going to fix this, but I need you to trust me. Can you make it through one more day? Pretend everything's normal. He nodded, and I gave him just enough pills to prevent withdrawal. It killed me to do it, but I needed him functional for what was coming. Back home, I had another visitor. Robert Carlyle arrived through the back door carrying a briefcase full of revelations. Your husband was brilliant, he said, spreading documents on my kitchen table. He knew they were monitoring his communications, so he used old-fashioned methods. Dead drops, coded messages through flower orders, even carrier pigeons to one contact. The picture that emerged was staggering. Derek and Stephanie had infiltrated not just our family, but Morrison Construction itself. They'd placed their people in key positions, siphoned money through shell companies, and prepared to gut the company the moment they had control. But here's where it gets interesting, Carlyle continued. 3 days before his death, Frank executed a series of legal maneuvers that would make your head spin. New trusts, revised partnerships, even a secret board meeting conducted via secure video conference. He restructured everything. What does that mean for the will? Carlyle smiled. It means whatever will Stephanie thinks she's about to benefit from is essentially meaningless. The assets aren't where she thinks they are. But she's so confident. Because Derek created fraudulent documents showing Frank transferred everything to Marcus before his death. And since Stephanie has power of attorney over Marcus, she thinks she controls it all. He pulled out another document. But this is Frank's real masterstroke. A codicil to his will executed in the hospital, witnessed by 2 nurses and the hospital's legal representative. Whatever happens in that reading room, this document supersedes everything else. I read through it slowly, my amazement growing. Frank hadn't just protected our assets. He'd laid a trap so complex and complete that Stephanie and Derek would hang themselves with their own greed. That afternoon, I prepared for my performance. I chose my clothes carefully, the same modest black dress Stephanie had selected for the funeral. I styled my hair, simply applied minimal makeup, and practiced my vacant, confused expression in the mirror. The phone rang, Stephanie checking on me. How are you feeling, Mom? Ready for this afternoon? I'm not sure I understand what's happening, I said, making my voice weak and tremulous. Will Marcus be there? Of course. Don't worry about anything. Just sit quietly and let the lawyers handle everything. It's what Frank would have wanted. After she hung up, I made one last call. Henderson, our family lawyer for 30 years, assured me everything was in place. It's going to be quite a show, he said, and I could hear the anticipation in his voice. Frank would have enjoyed this. I spent the remaining hours reviewing everything I'd learned. The flash drives contained terabytes of evidence, security footage of Stephanie forging signatures, audio recordings of her and Derek planning their crimes, financial records showing systematic theft, medical records documenting the poisoning. But the best part was what Frank had discovered about Derek's past. 3 previous elderly victims, all following the same pattern. Infiltrate the family, isolate the target, steal everything, then disappear. Except this time, Derek had met his match in Frank Morrison, a man who'd built an empire from nothing and wasn't about to let it be stolen by a 2-bit con artist with a handsome face. At 3 o'clock, I took one last look in the mirror. The woman staring back at me looked fragile, confused every inch the perfect victim. But behind those carefully vacant eyes burned the fury of a woman wronged, and the satisfaction of knowing justice was hours away. I drove to Henderson's office slowly, noting the car following me, Derek making sure I arrived. He needn't have worried. I wouldn't miss this for the world. The office building was familiar, but today it felt different. Today it was a stage, and I was about to give the performance of my life. I parked carefully, moved, slowly let my hands shake slightly as I gripped my purse. Inside, I paused at the elevator, looking confused. The security guard who'd known me for years rushed to help. "Mrs. Morrison, let me assist you. Such a difficult day." I smiled vaguely and let him guide me. Every moment was calculated, every gesture designed to reinforce the image of a broken, bewildered widow. Let them all see what they expected to see. Let Stephanie and Derek grow more confident with each passing moment. Because very soon, in a mahogany-paneled room on the 10th floor, their confidence was going to shatter like Frank's coffee cup had shattered on our kitchen floor, and I'd be there to watch every beautiful second of their destruction. The elevator rose slowly, carrying me toward my destiny, toward Frank's final gift, toward justice. I smiled, and for the first time in weeks, it was absolutely genuine. The elevator doors opened onto the 10th floor of Henderson Fitzgerald and Associates. I stepped out slowly, maintaining my facade of frailty, while my mind cataloged every detail. The reception area was crowded unusually so for a simple will reading. Stephanie stood near the windows, resplendent in a black Chanel suit that had probably cost more than most people's cars. She was holding court with several people I didn't recognize, gesturing animatedly. Her personal attorney, a sharp-faced man named Brennan whom I'd researched thoroughly, hovered at her elbow like a well-trained attack dog. "There she is," Stephanie announced, her voice carrying across the room. She glided over, radiating false concern. "Oh, Lucille, you look so tired. Are you sure you're up for this?" "I want to be here for Frank," I said softly, letting her guide me to a chair in the corner. Marcus sat slumped on a leather sofa, the pills I'd given him keeping him functional but docile. He glanced at me with guilt-ridden eyes, and I gave him the slightest nod of reassurance. "Just a little longer, my son. Hold on just a little longer." The mysterious man from the funeral, Robert Carlyle, entered with two companions. They took seats near the door, silent and watchful. Stephanie's eyes narrowed at their presence, but she was too confident to be truly concerned. "Who are those men?" she asked Brennan. "Probably creditors," he replied dismissively. "Morrison Construction has several outstanding contracts. They're likely here to see what assets are available." If only he knew. I hid my satisfaction by fumbling with my purse, dropping it, so Stephanie had to retrieve it for me. Such a helpful daughter-in-law, so attentive to her confused mother-in-law's needs. More people arrived. I recognized the chief financial officer of Morrison Construction, several board members, and surprisingly, Dr. Patricia Chen. My physician gave me a professional nod before taking a seat. The pieces were moving into position. "Quite a crowd," I murmured to Stephanie. She patted my hand condescendingly. "Don't worry about them. They're just here to witness the transfer of assets. Standard procedure for an estate this size." The way she said, "estate this size," made my skin crawl. She was already counting my money, already planning how to spend 45 years of Frank's sweat and sacrifice. At precisely 4 o'clock, Henderson's secretary appeared. "Mr. Henderson will see you now." The reading room was exactly as I remembered from happier occasions. Mahogany panels, hunter green leather chairs, Frank's favorite kind of understated elegance. The long conference table was polished to a mirror shine, and afternoon sunlight slanted through tall windows. Henderson sat at the head of the table, Frank's will in a leather portfolio before him. He was 74, had been Frank's friend before he was his lawyer, and the slight smile playing at his lips told me he was enjoying this immensely. "Please, everyone, take your seats," he said formally. Stephanie maneuvered quickly, placing herself and Brennan directly across from Henderson with Marcus beside her where she could control him. She tried to relegate me to the far end of the table, but I surprised her. "I want to sit where Frank would have sat," I said clearly, moving to the chair at Henderson's right hand. "It's what he would have wanted." A flicker of annoyance crossed Stephanie's face, but she couldn't object without seeming churlish. Score one for the confused widow. The others filed in, taking seats around the table. Carlyle and his companions remained by the door. The CFO and board members clustered together. Dr. Chen sat where she had a clear view of everyone. "Before we begin," Henderson said, "I need to verify that all interested parties are present. Marcus Morrison." "Here," Marcus mumbled. "Stephanie Morrison." "Present," she said crisply, already leaning forward in anticipation. "Lucille Morrison." "I'm here," I said softly. "And representing Morrison Construction, we have CFO James Hartley and board members." He read off several names, all confirming their presence. Brennan cleared his throat. "If we could move things along. My client has a busy schedule." "Of course," Henderson said mildly. "Though I should mention that this is a rather complex estate. There may be some surprises." Stephanie's smile widened. Oh, she was expecting surprises, all right. Just not the kind Henderson had in mind. "First," Henderson continued, "I must verify that I have the correct documentation." He pulled out a will dated 2 years ago. "This is the will Mr. Derek Ashford provided to me last week, allegedly signed by Frank Morrison." Derek, who'd been trying to blend into the wallpaper, straightened. "Not allegedly. That's Frank's signature. I witnessed it myself." "Interesting," Henderson murmured. "And you are?" "Derek Ashford, junior partner at Morrison Construction, Frank's protege." "I see. Well, Mr. Ashford, this will indeed appears to be properly executed. It leaves the bulk of the Morrison estate to Marcus Morrison and Stephanie Morrison as joint executors with specific provisions excluding Lucille Morrison for, quote, tax purposes." Stephanie couldn't contain herself. "You see, I told you, Lucille. Frank made proper arrangements. You don't need to worry about anything. Marcus and I will take care of everything." The condescension dripped from every word. Around the table, several of the board members shifted uncomfortably. They knew. Me knew what I'd contributed to building Morrison Construction. This will didn't sit right with them. "However," Henderson continued, and that single word wiped the smile from Stephanie's face, "there seems to be some confusion. You see, I have here another document." He pulled out a second folder, this one sealed with the hospital's legal stamp. Brennan was on his feet immediately. "What is this? We weren't informed of any other documents." "No," Henderson agreed pleasantly. "You weren't. This is a codicil to Mr. Morrison's will executed 1 week before his death at St. Mary's Hospital, witnessed by 2 nurses and the hospital's legal representative." The blood drained from Stephanie's face. "That's impossible. Frank was too ill to make legal decisions. He was on medication, confused." "On the contrary," Dr. Chen spoke up. "I have Mr. Morrison's medical records here. While he was certainly ill, his mental capacity was never in question. The attending physician documented his clarity specifically because Mr. Morrison requested it." "This is ridiculous," Derek burst out. "That will is ironclad. Frank signed it in my presence." "Did he?" Henderson asked mildly. "How interesting. Because according to security footage from Morrison Construction, you weren't in the building the day this will was allegedly signed. In fact," he pulled out another document, "you were in Costa Rica meeting with a property developer about a rather large purchase." The room went silent. Stephanie and Derek exchanged glances, their confidence evaporating like morning dew. Furthermore, Henderson continued clearly enjoying himself. "We have this rather interesting video." He turned on the conference room screen. Security footage played showing Stephanie in Frank's office practicing his signature over and over. The timestamp was clear. The date matched the will Derek had provided. That could be anyone," Stephanie stammered. "Really?" Henderson asked. "Because the woman in this video is wearing a rather distinctive bracelet. The same one you're wearing now, Mrs. Morrison. A Cartier piece that, according to the receipt, was purchased with funds embezzled from Morrison Construction." Brennan tried to salvage the situation. "This is all circumstantial. Even if there were irregularities with that will, my client is still the legal next of kin through her marriage to Marcus." "About that?" Henderson said, pulling out yet another document. Mr. Morrison was quite thorough in his final arrangements. He had some concerns about his son's capacity to make decisions given his medical condition. All eyes turned to Marcus, who seemed to shrink into his chair. "What medical condition?" Stephanie asked, her voice sharp. Dr. Chen spoke again. "Mr. Marcus Morrison has been struggling with opioid addiction for approximately 18 months. His medical records show a concerning pattern of prescriptions from multiple doctors, many of them paid for by credit cards in your name, Mrs. Morrison." "Those were legitimate prescriptions for his back pain," Stephanie protested. "Really?" Carlyle spoke for the first time, his voice cutting through the room. "Because we have recordings of you specifically discussing how to keep Marcus compliant through controlled substance dependency." He placed a small recorder on the table and pressed play. Stephanie's voice filled the room crystal clear. "Just keep him dosed. Once we have control of everything, we can put him in rehab. Or not. Honestly, an overdose would be cleaner." The board members gasped. Marcus looked at his wife in horror, the fog of drugs not quite enough to hide the betrayal. You said you were helping me," he whispered. "Shut up, Marcus," she snapped, her mask finally slipping. "I think," Henderson said calmly, "we should proceed to the actual will, the real one, the one Frank Morrison executed with full knowledge of what was happening in his family and his company." He opened the sealed envelope with ceremony. The room held its breath. "This codicil substantially alters the original will executed 15 years ago," he began. "First regarding personal effects and the family home." Stephanie leaned forward again, hope flickering in her eyes. Even if she'd lost the company, surely she'd get something. Henderson continued reading, his voice steady and clear. The legal language was complex, but the meaning was becoming devastatingly clear. Frank had known everything, and he'd prepared accordingly. "To my beloved wife, Lucille Morrison." Henderson read, "Who has stood by me through everything, who built this empire alongside me, who deserves far better than the betrayal she's suffered, I leave." The room waited. Stephanie gripped the table edge. Derek had gone pale, and I sat quietly playing my part to the end, even as my heart sang with Frank's love reaching out from beyond the grave. The trap was set, the prey was cornered, and in just a few more moments Frank would have his justice. Henderson adjusted his reading glasses, the pause stretching until the tension in the room was almost unbearable. Stephanie's knuckles were white as she gripped the table. Derek loosened his tie, sweat beading on his forehead despite the air conditioning. "To my beloved wife, Lucille Morrison." Henderson continued, "I leave the entirety of my personal estate, including all bank accounts, investment portfolios, and real property, with the exception of specific bequests detailed below." "That's impossible!" Stephanie shrieked, shooting to her feet. "The will we filed supersedes any previous documents." "Please sit down, Mrs. Morrison," Henderson said coolly. "I'm not finished." Brennan put a restraining hand on Stephanie's arm, pulling her back to her seat. "Let him finish," he murmured, though his own face had gone pale. Regarding Morrison Construction, Henderson read on, "I hereby reveal that 6 months ago, I restructured the company's ownership. 90% of all shares have been transferred to the Lucille Morrison Trust, established in 1987 and updated annually since. This trust has always been the true owner of Morrison Construction. The shares I appeared to own personally were merely held in my name for tax purposes." The CFO James Hartley nodded slowly. "That explains the discrepancies we found in the books. We thought it was an error. Furthermore," Henderson continued, "any documents purporting to transfer ownership or assets signed within the last 3 years are hereby declared null and void, as I have evidence that they were signed under duress or forged entirely." "This is a setup," Derek exploded. "You can't just invalidate legal documents." "Actually," Carlyle interjected, "we can when those documents were obtained through fraud, forgery, and attempted murder." He stood, and his 2 companions did likewise. "Mr. Ashford, or should I say, Mr. Paulson, I'm Agent Carlyle with the FBI Financial Crimes Division. These are Agents Martinez and Chen. You're under arrest for wire fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy to commit murder." The room erupted. Derek tried to bolt for the door, but Agent Martinez was faster, catching him before he'd taken 3 steps. Stephanie screamed, lunging across the table at me. You knew, you lying, manipulative witch." Agent Chen restrained her efficiently. "Mrs. Morrison, you're also under arrest. You have the right to remain silent." As they read Stephanie her rights, Henderson calmly continued with the will. "To my son Marcus Morrison, I leave the sum of $5 million to be held in trust and administered by his mother Lucille Morrison until such time as he completes a certified rehabilitation program and maintains sobriety for 1 full year." Marcus was sobbing now, his head in his hands. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." I broke character, then moving around the table to hold my son. "We'll get through this," I whispered. "Your father loved you. He made sure you'd have a chance to get better." "There's more," Henderson said gently. He pulled out a letter, Frank's handwriting clear on the envelope. "Mr. Morrison left a personal message to be read at this time." With shaking hands, I opened the letter and read it aloud. "My dearest family and colleagues, if you're hearing this, then my worst fears have been realized. I discovered 6 months ago that my family had been infiltrated by criminals. My son was being systematically addicted to opioids. My wife was being slowly poisoned, and my company was being hollowed out from within. I could have acted immediately, but I needed irrefutable proof. I needed to protect not just my family's assets, but their lives. So I played along, let them think I was foolish, let them believe their plan was working. To Stephanie and Derek, who thought you were so clever, every document you forged, I documented. Every conversation you had in my office, I recorded. Every penny you stole, I traced. The FBI has been building a case against you for months with my full cooperation. To Marcus, my son, your addiction is not your fault. You were targeted because of your trusting nature. The best part of you turned against you. Get help. Get better. Your mother will support you as she has always supported me. To my darling Lucille, you are the love of my life, my partner in all things. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you what I was doing. I needed your reactions to be genuine, needed them to believe they had fooled us both. But I knew, my darling, I knew you would be strong enough to survive this. I knew you would see justice done." The penthouse Stephanie and Derek thought was their secret love nest, I've been having it monitored for months. The offshore accounts they established, already frozen by federal authorities. The property in Costa Rica seized. But here's the best part, the part that would make my Lucille laugh. "Remember our honeymoon, darling. Remember that sunrise on the beach when I promised you I'd always protect you, even if it meant protecting you from the grave? I told you then that you were worth more than all the money in the world. I meant it then, and I mean it now. Stephanie Derrick, you thought you were stealing a fortune. But you forgot the most important thing. Lucille Morrison is Morrison Construction. She's been the registered owner through her trust since 1987 after our bankruptcy scare. I never owned more than 10% personally. Every document you forged, every asset you thought you were stealing, was already hers. You con artists thought you found an easy mark in an old man and his aging wife. Instead, you found yourselves in a trap 45 years in the making. All my love, Frank. P.S. Henderson, I believe this is where you start laughing. And Henderson did. He laughed the rich, full laugh of a man watching justice served with style. Around the table, the board members began to understand the full scope of what had happened. Several of them began applauding. You're lying, Stephanie screamed as the agents hauled her toward the door. This is all lies, I'll sue. I'll take everything. Actually, Brennan said, gathering his papers with shaking hands, you won't. I'm no longer representing you, Mrs. Morrison. Attempting to defend fraud of this magnitude would end my career. Derrick had gone silent, his face gray, as he calculated the years he'd spend in federal prison. As they passed my chair, he looked at me with something like respect. The old man was smarter than I thought, he said quietly. He was smarter than everyone thought, I replied. That's why he built an empire while you'll be building license plates. The FBI agents led them out, Stephanie still shrieking threats and denials. The room slowly emptied until it was just Henderson, Marcus, and me. There's one more thing, Henderson said, pulling out a final envelope. Frank left this for you to read privately. I opened it with trembling fingers. My darling Lucille, if you're reading this, I'm gone and the rats have been caught in the trap. I'm sorry for the deception, sorry for the pain you've endured. But I knew you were strong enough. You always were the strongest of us all. The construction company was always yours in my heart, now it's yours in law. Take care of our son. He's weak, but he's ours. With help, he can become the man we raised him to be. I've arranged everything with Henderson. The FBI will handle the criminal cases. The company transitions to you smoothly. And there's something else. Remember how you always wanted to establish a foundation for families affected by elder fraud? I've set aside $30 million for exactly that purpose. Make it magnificent, my love. I had 45 wonderful years with you. Not everyone gets that lucky. Not everyone finds their soulmate at 19 and gets to keep them forever. Thank you for every sunrise, every challenge we faced together, every dream we built. Until we meet again, your devoted Frank. I was crying now, but they were clean tears. Tears of love, of justice, of endings and beginnings. Marcus reached for my hand. Mom, I want to get better. I want to be the son Dad believed I could be. You will, I promised. We'll do it together. Henderson stood gathering his papers. Lucille, the company lawyers, will be in touch tomorrow to formalize the transition. For what it's worth, Frank would be proud. You played your part perfectly. He taught me well, I said simply. As we prepared to leave, Marcus asked, How did you do it, Mom? How did you pretend to be so helpless when they were destroying our family? I looked at my son, still shaky but finally clear-eyed. Sometimes, Marcus, the best way to catch a predator is to look like prey. Your father knew that. He made sure I knew it too. We walked out of that mahogany-paneled room together, mother and son, broken but not beaten. Behind us, the sunset painted Denver's skyline gold, and somewhere I knew Frank was smiling. The trap had been sprung, justice had been served, and the real work of rebuilding our family could finally begin. 6 months later, I stood in the courthouse watching Stephanie and Derrick receive their sentences. The federal prosecutor had done an exceptional job presenting the evidence. The jury had deliberated for less than 2 hours. "Stephanie Morrison," the judge intoned, "you are hereby sentenced to 25 years in federal prison for conspiracy to commit murder, wire fraud, embezzlement, and forgery." Stephanie, wearing orange instead of Chanel, no longer looked like the polished predator who'd infiltrated our family. Her roots were showing, her face drawn without its expensive makeup. She'd tried to turn on Derek, claiming he'd masterminded everything, but the recordings were clear. They were equal partners in evil. Derek Paulson, also known as Derek Ashford. The judge continued, "You are sentenced to 35 years in federal prison. This court takes particular note of your previous victims and the callousness with which you targeted elderly individuals." Derek maintained his composure, but I saw his hands shake as the bailiffs led him away. 3 previous victims had come forward during the investigation, elderly widows who'd lost everything. Their testimony had sealed his fate. Marcus sat beside me, 6 months sober and looking healthier than he had in years. The rehabilitation had been brutal, but he'd persevered. He squeezed my hand as his ex-wife was led past us. "Don't come crying to me when you're old and alone," Stephanie spat at me. "I won't be alone," I replied calmly. "I have my son, my company, and my conscience. That's more than you'll have for the next 25 years. Outside the courthouse, Robert Carlyle waited with the other FBI agents who'd worked the case. "Congratulations, Mrs. Morrison," he said, shaking my hand. "Your husband would be proud." "He knew this day would come," I said. "He made sure of it." The reporters were waiting, of course. The story of the widow who'd helped expose a massive fraud had captivated the public. I gave a brief statement about elder fraud awareness and the importance of vigilance, then mentioned the Frank Morrison Foundation we'd established to help victims. Back at Morrison Construction, the company was thriving under my leadership. I'd kept all of Frank's good people and cleaned out the ones Derek had placed. Martha had returned as my executive assistant, bringing her decades of experience and loyalty. "The foundation's grand opening is next week," she reminded me as I settled into Frank's old office. My office now, though I still felt his presence in every corner. "The mayor will be attending, and we've already received applications for assistance from 43 families. The Frank Morrison Foundation for Elder Protection had been my first major initiative as CEO. We provided legal assistance, private investigation services, and financial counseling to families dealing with elder fraud. In Frank's memory, we made sure no one else would suffer what we'd endured." "Mom." Marcus knocked and entered wearing a suit that actually fit properly. He'd joined the company 3 months ago, starting in the mailroom at his own insistence. "The new Barcelona project proposals are ready for your review." "How's it going down there with the mail crew?" I asked, noting the genuine smile on his face. "They're teaching me humility," he laughed. "Yesterday, Eddie told me that just because my name's on the building doesn't mean I can skip my turn making coffee." This was the son Frank and I had raised, finally emerging from the fog of addiction and manipulation. He attended meetings every day, worked hard, and slowly earned his colleagues' respect through merit, not nepotism. That evening, I had dinner with Thomas Wentworth, the widower, whose wife had been one of Derek's previous victims. We'd met during the trial preparation, bonding over our shared experiences of betrayal and loss. He was a retired federal judge, 71, with kind eyes and an infectious laugh. "I never thought I'd trust anyone again after what happened to Margaret," he said over dessert. "But watching you handle everything with such grace, you gave me hope, Lucille." "Frank would want me to be happy," I said, surprising myself with the admission. "He'd probably be matchmaking from heaven if he could." Thomas laughed. "Margaret would be doing the same. She always said I needed someone to keep me from becoming a grumpy old hermit." We'd been taking it slow, dinners and concerts, long walks where we talked about everything and nothing. He understood the weight of loving someone for decades and losing them. he also understood the importance of justice and the strength it took to fight for it. A year after the will reading on a crisp October morning, I stood at Frank's grave with a bouquet of roses from our garden. The headstone was simple the way he'd wanted it. Frank Morrison, husband, father, builder of dreams. "We did it, my love," I whispered. Marcus is 2 years sober now, running the residential division. The company's stronger than ever. The foundation has helped over 100 families. And those vipers who tried to destroy us, they're right where they belong. I placed the roses carefully and traced his name with my fingertips. "I met someone. Thomas. You'd like him. He has your sense of humor and your passion for justice. He's not trying to replace you, couldn't if he tried. But he makes me laugh again." The wind rustled through the cemetery trees, and I could almost hear Frank's voice. "Be happy, Lucille. You deserve it." At the Foundation's second anniversary gala, held in the penthouse that had once been Stephanie and Derek's love nest, now transformed into our headquarters, I looked out at the crowd. Families we'd helped, board members who'd stood by me, Marcus, accepting an award for young leadership in recovery advocacy. Thomas raised his glass to me from across the room, and I smiled. We'd married quietly 6 months earlier, a simple ceremony with just family and close friends. He'd moved into a condo near mine, respecting the home Frank and I had shared while building something new together. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, stepping to the microphone, 2 years ago, my family was nearly destroyed by predators who thought age made us weak, that trust made us foolish. They were wrong. The room applauded, and I continued. "Frank Morrison built more than a construction empire. He built a legacy of love, protection, and justice that extends beyond death. Every family we help, every criminal we expose, every elder we protect is a brick in that legacy." I looked at Marcus, clear-eyed and proud, at Martha, loyal beyond measure, at Thomas, my unexpected second chance at love. To those who would prey on the vulnerable, let this be your warning. We are not victims. We are not easy marks. We are warriors disguised as grandparents, and we will protect our own. The standing ovation was thunderous, but I barely heard it. In my mind, I was 22 again, standing on a beach at sunrise with a young man who promised to protect me always. Promise kept, my love. Promise kept. Later that night, as Thomas and I walked through the garden at my home, he asked, "Any regrets?" I considered the question, thinking of all the pain, the betrayal, the loss. "No," I said finally. Everything that happened led to this moment. The pain taught me strength. The betrayal taught me wisdom. And Frank's love taught me that justice and mercy can coexist. "You're a remarkable woman, Lucille Morrison Wentworth." "I'm a woman who refused to be a victim," I corrected. "That's all any of us can do when predators circle. We stand up, we fight back, and we protect others from suffering the same fate." The moon rose over the garden Frank and I had planted together 30 years ago. The roses were in full bloom, their scent carrying on the night air. Somewhere in the distance, a nightbird sang, and I felt a deep sense of peace. Stephanie and Derek had thought they were stealing money. They never understood that what Frank and I had built couldn't be measured in dollars. It was measured in trust earned, promises kept, and love that transcended even death. They thought they'd won when they killed him. They never realized that in killing Frank Morrison, they'd awakened Lucille Morrison. And that was their biggest mistake of all. As I headed inside, my phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Mom just wanted to say I love you. Dad would be so proud of us." I smiled, texting back, "He is proud, and so am I." Tomorrow there would be new challenges. The foundation would help another family. The company would break ground on another project. Life would continue its endless cycle of joy and sorrow, triumph and loss. But tonight, I was at peace. The elderly widow they'd tried to destroy had become a warrior for justice. The family they'd tried to tear apart was stronger than ever. And the love story that began on a beach 47 years ago continued different now, but unbroken. Frank had promised to protect me even from the grave. In teaching me to protect myself and others, he'd given me the greatest gift of all the knowledge that we are never too old to fight, never too frail to stand up for justice, and never too broken to begin again. The last laugh, it turned out, wasn't just Frank's or mine. It belonged to everyone who refused to be a victim. And it echoed through the halls of Morrison Construction, through the Foundation's offices, through the federal prisons, where predators learned that some prey have teeth. Justice served with love and a touch of Morrison style. Just the way Frank would have wanted it. Dear friends, I hope Lucille's story has touched your heart as much as it touched mine. Have you or someone you know ever faced betrayal from those who should have protected you? How did you find the strength to fight back? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. Your experiences might help someone else find their courage. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more tales of justice and redemption. Share this with anyone who needs a reminder that it's never too late to stand up for what's right. Thank you for joining me today. Remember, you're stronger than you know, and sometimes the best revenge is a life well lived. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay strong, and never let anyone make you feel powerless.